you need to look further than that. Like, did you not read those? Like, it happens. So it, and that's just the unpredictability of business and of life and so on. But just navigating around these risks and making sure that you're informed is ultimately, and you've created the best situation possible. That's about all that you can do. Okay. I'm doing everything I can. Is there another one back there, sir? Was that your hand? Go ahead.
The part-timers. The person has a full-time job elsewhere, coming to my facility twice or 3 times a week, for a few hours, using my equipment, working with my facility.
I mean, the fact that they're part-time is not particularly relevant. There's lots of part-time employees. Like Starbucks is not full of contractors. It's full of part-time employees. And if their other line of work is as an employee, that doesn't probably help you very much. If their other line of work was as a contractor, that would go a long way. So the part-time in itself, not a particularly important factor. I mean, it is important, but it's not enough on its own by any stretch.
So it means that from now on, I'm responsible for their taxes. What about stat holidays and sick days? If
the person's an employee, as a part-time employee, yeah. Now, some of those things are not as bad as you think. So if the person is only working there for a few hours, a couple of times a week, it's not like you need to give them a week of 8 hours a day pay or 2 weeks of 8 hours a day pay for vacation. It's 4% of their wages, 6% after they've been there for 5 years. So it's not as bad as you may be thinking, but are you supposed to withhold taxes for some and remit them to the government for somebody who's a part-time employee? Yeah. I mean, we can get into the specific case and look at the factors. Are they invoicing you? There's like an HST number involved. That's just the simple form of it. But part-time isn't the be-all and end-all.
So if I'm a business owner and want to hire a helper once a week or twice a week, where do I read all the regulations, what are vacation pay and all this? Is it Employment Standard Act?
Typically, the main legislation would be the Employment Standards Act, but there are actually at least 20 different pieces of legislation pertaining to the workplace, like the Income Tax Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Employment Standards Act. I can rhyme these off. The Employers and Employees Act, there's the Pay Equity Act. There's a lot of pieces of legislation. The Human Rights Code. So the easiest,
That you mentioned, where is it written?
The 4%.
Yeah.
That's in the Employment Standards Act. But yeah, it's not always as easy as it might seem to be, Yeah. Sure.
As we know, right now, if a person works 5 years in a company, he gets 3
weeks.
3 weeks vacation. So let's say situation, I have a friend, she's working in the company, and she already has a 3. So can she ask more?
Well, she can ask, but there's no obligation.
The employer not supposed to give her more because
No, it's a minimum. It's a minimum. Just like if you got paid $14 an hour in December, you don't suddenly get a raise to $17 an hour. You're just still getting paid $14 an hour, and you just don't get to feel as good about it. That's
like a lot of people is actually asking, and they actually pushing their employees about you rise to the who was on the minimum, so rise to mine. So and people doesn't know how to make it because before, again, about that person was getting 14 for his job because he knew something. And now the lower gets as well 14, so how that the government can come and say, okay, now we needed to rise them, or no?
No,
No.
no. As long as you're compliant with the act, you are compliant with the act. You don't need to say, you don't need to give a raise to somebody who was already making at least the minimum wage. They might be able to negotiate that, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, but like it's for that question about the regular.
Yeah.
And someone else, another?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm an IT. I'm an independent IT consultant. There are probably a couple of people here in the same industry, but I have a question of the following nature. So I'm in possession of a finding or study from one of recruitment agencies where they assessed the ad and they made a few statements in there. So I wanted to know your opinion on a particular phrase.
Okay.
I'm going to read it to you. As of November 22nd, 2017, it's a crime for employers to engage the services of independent subcontractor or sole proprietor that might not meet the standards of independence set out by the Canada Revenue Agency. It's the employer responsibility to make sure that the independent is truly independent. So my question is it really true that it is the crime for the employers to hire independent contractors if they are not meeting the requirements of independence?
No, it's not a crime. It's not a crime.
So is it just blown over?
Yes, overblown. Rhetoric. It's like somebody making a speech. It's not a crime. Nobody's going to jail.
So the companies that hire contractors are not supposed to be doing this thorough vetting of independency.
Well, so we're talking here in the tax context. So in the tax context, there is mischaracterizing things. And the CRA will say, you have characterized. We do not characterize it that way. We characterize it this way. As a consequence, you owe these taxes. Then there is and it's straightforward, and maybe you have the interest or conceivably the penalties for paying late on the taxes. That is by far the most common situation.
But that would be affecting the contractor, not the
It would be affecting the contractor, but it can also affect the employer because the CRA is fully empowered to go after the employer rather than chasing down the contractor. Often the employer is an easier target, particularly if there's a number of employees or if the employee has spent the money or isn't in the country anymore. Like there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's much easier to target the employer.
But if the company relies on services of contractors for their day-to-day operations, let's say they have a department consisting of, let's say, 3, 5, 600 people, and let's say a third of it is contractors, and they continuously issue contracts to do this daily work. So is that the company's then target of the CRA?
Gosh, yeah. You think the CRA wants to chase down 600 contractors who at any one time, and how many have rotated through? It's now into the thousands. They don't want to do that. They'll just chase the employer.
So what can they do to the company?
They will issue an order that the company has to pay, and if the company doesn't pay it, they can just seize bank accounts and so on. CRA has a lot of powers.
I can give you an example of that, actually. I hired a contractor, and he gave me a wrong HST number. The CRA does an audit, comes in to check this number, it's fake. Right away, says, could I have a check, please? I have to give him a check. Then I have to try to get the money back from the guy.
I think I know who you're referring to.
Yeah. I mean, as to the question about is it crime? So, I mean, so as I say, vast majority of the time, it's these are the taxes you should have paid and you need to pay them now, plus interest, and maybe there's a late penalty. If you get into what's called gross negligence, then there are going to be additional penalties, sometimes as a percentage of the tax that should have been paid but wasn't. But to get to the ultimate level of actual sort of tax evasion as a crime, it's a very high level. Like a crime's pretty shameless conduct. So actual criminal tax evasion where there's like a prison sentence. It was for very severe misconduct. I would think, in that situation, if the CRA had already found people to be employees, not contractors, and the company kept doing it, like in exactly the same situation, then maybe we're starting to get into something closer to a criminal situation. But as a first time, no, you've been doing this wrong, a crime is just rhetoric. Okay.
I have a question. Now, the new rule for calculation of statutory holidays, these days, like couple of weeks, we have family day. How to calculate this statutory holiday?
Sorry, I think I'm getting some sort of signal from Eugene. Are we running out of time? Is that?
No, I think we can show the public.
Oh, okay. Eugene wants to answer that one. Eugene wants to answer that.
We will show you how to do it. We will show you. We have actually dealt with CRA and this issue last week, and we'll show you how to do this work. No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There you go. Sure. One minute.
Can you explain to me when you were talking about the entrepreneur test, the chance of profit and the risk of loss? Can you just kind of...
Sure. So the question is there a chance of profit? And is there a risk of loss? And how meaningful are those things? So if somebody is just getting paid by the hour, there's no chance of profit. There's also no risk of loss. All they do is it's just a straightforward hourly calculation. Let's say, on the other hand, that they're a truck driver and they get paid a certain amount to deliver a bunch of chocolate bars to convenience stores, okay? Now, if they, and that's a fixed amount, okay? It's if they line things up so that they go to convenience store 1 and convenience store 2 and convenience store 3 in a row, they won't need to spend a lot of time doing that, and they won't need to use a lot of gas doing that. And if this truck driver has the ability, A, is paying for the gas, and B, is potentially even able to hire somebody else to do his run for him, then he can make a profit there, right? If it only costs this much to operate the truck and this much to pay the other guy, and he gets paid this much for the deliveries of the chocolate bars, he can make a profit. If things work out badly for him, he can have a loss, right? So the truck situation there looks a lot like an independent contractor. If he gets paid, $25 an hour to drive the truck. It doesn't matter, he doesn't even the one who sets the route. There's no chance of profit. There's no risk of loss. So that's the kind of arrangement where that will be one looks much more like an employee, one looks much more like a contractor.
And would that be something that you would have written into a contract, so like an independent contract? You would have something like that written into it?
When you say something like that?
Like the risk of profit, or the risk of loss and chance of profit.
Well, you definitely have, whatever the deal is, and it either written into the contract or, maybe because it changes a lot over time, it would exist somewhere, right? So it's not that the contract says you can make a profit. It's that the actual arrangements have to provide for a way to make a profit, or that there would be a way you could run a loss, right? So it's the setup. If it's mentioned, sometimes the setup will be laid out in the contract, and you can just see logically how it would work one way or another. At other times, the contract's a little higher level. It doesn't have all those details, but those details will exist somewhere. Okay.
And, sorry.
Go ahead.
You're talking about the equal pay. Is that applicable also to independent contractors?
So, I mean, no. So if somebody's an independent contractor, and they truly are an independent contractor, then they can get paid something different from regular employees. But if they're not, then no. I know you had a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, if you want to change terms of employment halfway through, is there a notice that has to be given? Like, for example, if there was salary plus commission, and we want to go straight salary with no base pay?
Whole different seminar, which I deal with every day, all the time.
Okay, I think we are overstating a little bit of kindness of Aaron. He has promised us so much time and given us that much, so we would like to say thank you. Thank you so much for providing the information and attending to this seminar. Now, I can provide his contact information for anyone who is interested to get into details on development of the contract for your employees or for your contract employees. And Aaron, I'm sure, will be happy to help you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think all the areas were done great because